Fans when you were kids, or yeah,
Everybody's a pirate fan when you're a kid.
that's very true.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with Seahawk and Captain Blood, and it was just a part of. I think I came to it at the same age that I came to Raiders or whatever, and sort of understood it as being part of the same DNA. And there's just no. It's weird. It's we've talked about it a lot, but it's a genre where. You think it's played out, you think you've seen it a million times. I challenge you to name 6 pirate movies, not including the 5 other of the Disney ones. I mean, it's like there just aren't that many. And there's a good reason why. They're really hard to do. It's really hard to shoot big ships on the water.
And do them well, for that matter.
And do them well, and especially now where the bar is so high for what you need to be able to pull off. Forget about the features in TV too. It's just, I think it took a long time for technology to get to the point where you don't have to do everything practically, which is virtually impossible. And we're sort of coming to that now. I think what we saw a few years ago was that it was starting to happen. Like, if you got the right partners and you found somebody who was really willing to commit to it, you could do this. You could tell this story and tell it in a really uncompromising way. And we lucked out and found those people, and they've been great.
Good, thank you.
Did you do a lot of research, or any of the pirates based on real pirates?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we took characters from Treasure Island as a sort of a launching point, and then quickly sort of felt like just within the history of this place where we set the story, there's so many great people that just pop off the page, and so our feeling was kind of like, let's just use whoever works. Let's pick from both. Let's treat it like a buffet of great history, great story, and sort of find the ones that just make the most sense for the story we're telling. So, we have Charles Levine, who's based on a real person. We have Benjamin Hornigold. We have Jack Rackham and Bonnie. Yeah, that was Anne Bonny. We showed the first episode last night, but I'm not sure we ever quite identify her as being Anne Bonny, but that's her. Yeah, exactly. And potentially going forward, there's other people that we are now very familiar with, having done the research, that we're excited to sort of like twist or put our little treatment on.
It's like walking into this great attic of stuff that nobody's touched in a long time, and all of it. All of these names, and both from Treasure Island and from history, and just getting to start to dust them off and realize that there's a reason why everybody knows about them and why they're so much fun. They have free reign now.
Are there any sort of media cliches associated with pirates that you're looking to turn on their heads with the series?
All of them. I think the intent when we started was to fanatically root out cliche from the show, to the point where we ended up having to walk it back. But we wanted everybody, department heads, directors, everybody responsible for the show to understand that if it's something they expected to see in a pirate show before they came to work here, it shouldn't be here.
Or it should be questioned, examined from the standpoint of like,
exactly,
is this lending to the reality of this,
right,
distracting.
And so it's what's funny, I mean, ironically, a lot of the cliches come from Treasure Island. They're not rooted in history. They're rooted from this campfire story that Robert Louis Stevenson told his kid. And so in an attempt, I think, to service that material, you have to go past it and understand that the world he was writing about, he was already interpreting. And so I think what we wanted to do was to take this really great mythology he had built and treat it as though it is that, treat it as though it is a story, and to go back to, we're almost, I think, trying to tell the story, the reality of the story that led to the adventure of Treasure.
Yeah, and success, if the show continues on, our hope is that by the time you've watched our show and cared so much for these characters and gone on this sort of moving, tragic journey with them, that you will read Treasure Island in a new way. You'll be able to see between the lines the things that happened on the show and have it all still make sense, but be recontextualized. Because I think the larger story of what happened in the Caribbean with piracy, it's amazing. It's so relatable. relatable, it's so relevant to what's happening in our world today, and so it didn't feel like we had to choose between the entertainment and the fun of Treasure Island and the politics and the grittiness and the violence of what really happened. And we could, you know, because we're on Stars and because we have Michael Bay, and that's what we're trying to do.
And I find that like pirates as characters, like I wrote a novel of characters, and I think like characters like that, like it's hard to keep them sympathetic or like relatable because they're like ordinary people. Is that like a challenge for you guys, or did you find like within their stories it's just like a natural?
I think to me, I mean, nobody thinks they're an asshole. You know?
Right.
And I think
Exactly.
everybody in their own story is doing something for a reason that makes sense.
Right.
And pirates included. And I think we wanted to be able to tell stories about a number of different. First of all, I think we really wanted to make sure there was no play. That it was never that the pirates are doing X because they're all different people. They're all there for completely different reasons. And I think you know, I think as long as you look for that, as long as you look for a motivation that feels like if I were in that person's shoes, that would be a thing I would have to consider doing. I think that tends to keep people from turning into villains and keep some people.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately we want the British to become a character in the story and not to have them be quite so pigeonholed as either good or bad. It's like always finding a way that what the person's doing makes sense because of the world they live in. And that expands to the prostitutes on the island, that expands to the smugglers that dealt with the pirates, that expands to the farmers that had to put up with them. It's like any point of view into this world, we want to try and find a way to link it up to those themes. People, it's a frontier story, we keep saying. It's people trying to figure out an existence for themselves on the far side of the world because they've been rejected by the place that they came from.
I think for both of us, The Wire is a show that's kind of true north for how a show should be built. And there are no heroes in that show, there are no villains in that show, it's just people trying to get by. And I think that's the approach we wanted to take with this is it's just people trying to get by. It just so happens that the industry they find themselves in is has these pirates.
And that doesn't mean that they're not, that they don't have egos, that they don't have appetites, that they don't, that they're not violent, that they're not desperate. You know, we can play all those things and get to the same stuff you want from a pirate show: the sword fights and the cannons, the explosions and the boats. And it's just about like making sure that between all of that, there's human beings.
It's The Wire with cannons.
Was there anything you wanted to put on the show but you just couldn't because stuff happened?
Not really. I mean, I hate to say that because I'm sure I'll think of it in 5, but no. I mean, we really have had enough support to do everything within reason. And I think when we set out to build it as big as we could think to do it within reason, we were able to. You know, I mean, it didn't have that downward pressure that I feel like a lot of shows have, where from the get-go you're already throwing stuff over the side because there's just not enough time or money. We just haven't had that feeling. We have a budget, we have a schedule,
And we only had 8 hours. I mean, I think that's the only reason I'm nodding is that, you know, there's a lot of stuff we want to do. Should we get a chance to continue the story?
But all that stuff's going on screen eventually, hopefully, you know, if we're lucky enough to get future seasons. It's, there was a feeling, I think, there was a feeling from Michael and from Bradford, from Chris and Carmen at Stars, and from us that nobody wanted to see the show go watered down. And I think what's great about it is that when we would pitch something or when we would write something that they saw and they were excited about, everybody came together around the idea of like, let's do this, let's figure out a way to make this real. You know, is it going to cost a little bit more money? Maybe let's do it. Let's figure out a way to make that happen. And that's really
yeah. I mean, we showed our first episode last night, and I think, you know, I hope people were impressed with the scale of it and the boats and everything. And for us, it's exciting because it's not even our biggest episode in the first one. You know, we have at least 2 or 3 more that are equally exciting and equally big. So we're hoping we really surpass your expectations in terms of how big and scopy and exciting the show is.
Was Toby Stevens your first choice?
Toby was kind of, from us, I will put it this way, from the moment we saw his audition, he was the only choice. Toby Stevens is amazing. And I think there were a couple of actors actually where when we saw, I didn't fully understand the character we had written until I saw their audition, which is a weird thing to feel. We had, we knew who they were, we knew what they were supposed to do, but there was just something missing. And then you watch an actor step into that role, and just suddenly it all makes sense. And Toby was one of them. We actually, when we set out, we said, it would be great if we could find a guy who's kind of typecast as playing villains, and you haven't seen him much lately, and he just kind of needs to grow into himself and become a star. And then Toby walked in, and I was like, oh, that guy, that's perfect, we'll take it. And
We need, yeah.
then it was just like, and could be a nicer guy, like just like a total pro.
Well, he comes from a very, how shall I say this, royal background to a certain extent, so it's not surprising.
He is, Toby Stevens is genetically engineered
Exactly.
to be a star.
Exactly.
Yeah, he's great. I love him.
He's, we needed Flint to be a lot of things that are kind of contradictory. We needed him to be a statesman and a visionary, but we also needed him to be a little unhinged and to have that potential for violence. And we needed him to be funny. We needed him to be wounded. And like every time Toby picks up a scene, he delivers on that and he surprises you. And I sort of can't wait for people to see the rest of the season because it just keeps your understanding of him just keeps growing with every episode.
Yeah.
One more question, and also I just wanted to correct myself. Robert is actually our co-creator. I think I said executive producer, and I ended up going on like 2 hours of sleep, and it's starting to show. So continue, but I wanted to.
His name is Robert.
Yeah.
So you went to the FIP party last night. There was some party. I heard rumors about it. No?
Oh, to the pirate party?
Yeah?
Yeah, no, it was fun. There were pirates there. People showed up dressed as pirates.
They danced.
And yes, they
You
did.
showed up as
Madonna.
I did not show up
You
as a
didn't
pirate.
show
I
up
showed
as
up
a
as Jon Steinberg. Other people showed up as pirates.
In terms of the screening, were you getting the audience reaction you had anticipated? Like there were certain points from your perspective that
Yeah, I mean, there were a couple of laughs that fortunately fell in places that were supposed to be funny.
Yeah.
And I think at the end, there's a couple of moments that, at least to me, felt like if you're cheering in this moment, it at least means you understood what happened, and that you're in it, and you're invested in it. So yeah, I think it was a really good response from the super excited.
The story moves very fast, and that's intentional. And one of the things you risk is the characters that you're trying to get people to invest in. A lot of screen time, and so we really try to create moments when these people are introduced that kind of immediately get you to smile and be on board with them. And I feel like there were a couple of those where that seemed to work. So I feel good about that. It was great to see that people responded the way we hoped they would.
The show is airing in January. Is it already finished, or are you still shooting? Or
No, the show is pictures locked. We're still working on vis effects for all 8 episodes, but yeah, the production is wrapping soon.
Congratulations, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fabulous.